We'll get 2 hours.
Get up!
There was a time not long ago when each and every day at 6 o'clock each evening Union News was on its way. From anchors of integrity and 3 channels to choose. It's what we call the news. Then along came cable and the ratings race ensued. Great legends found themselves replaced by blondes with big fake boobs. Debate replaced with punditry and politically skewed. It's what we call the news. We interrupt this story, which is coming from Iraq. As Rosie Sue and Donald Sue and Rosie back. We're cutting from Darfur in Des Moines with urgent news. There's a finger in my food. Guitars, silent sound effects, and graphics everywhere. Breaking news is hidden in the rush to get on air. With scandals, dramas, tragedies, and mindless ballyhoo that's turned our brains to glue. Now only 3% can point to Kabul on a map, but 96% can claim they've seen rich Putin. The world's greatly affected by the stories you choose to put into the news. Bronco chases, plane wreck shootings, victims on a cruise. John Bonet's got Peterson and Nicole too. Celebrities in rehab and appalling at the zoo. It's what we call what we call the news. This just in, President Bush can't open a door. They call this crap the news. That's what they call it.
Now, what I did with this posting, that was the lighter side. And then the darker side, the story just following that, is the American media, occupied territory, and how since the early 1980s they've been selling the Israelis here in this country. And, you know, these are some of the reasons why Mr. Abram Foxman of the American Defamation League will not touch yours truly, because I've got eyes, I can see. And he doesn't want to bring any attention to me whatsoever. So I just found it a little bit humorous. At any rate, guys, you know, I was watching on Netflix, they have a documentary section, and there was a very good PBS documentary that was done on how the boys, how the bankers, the scammers, pulled this entire thing off. And I was shocked to see this. Well, I went in the next day, and I was going to watch it again and take a few crib notes. Poof, the thing was up and missing. But what was on there was kind of the first half of this leading up to the great banking scandal, USA 2007. And I was able to at least watch that one. I was going to download the doggone thing, but it up and disappeared. There are some people, Mr. Chapman, in this country that do not, they absolutely do not want the American people to know who the players were, how this whole thing came about, how they've been rolling this thing downhill. And, you know, you said before we're going to have 3,000 banks fail in this country. Well, we've already had, what, this year, 130, something like that, 134?
Probably 1,500 a year for the next 2 years. And that'll take 3,000 down. It could get as bad as 4, you know, over the next 2 years after that. I think it's nationalization and consolidation as well as anything else. They want to control the banks. Now that it looks like 1207 is going to pass, the illuminists must be jumping up and down. What are we going to do if they start looking at the books of the Fed, and they'll find out all the stuff that we've been up to for years and years? And they'll do away with us, and we'll lose our control of the financial system. And they're more interested in that, and they don't know how to stop it.
Well, I had somebody call me today and said, well, I finally figured it out how to get rid of the IRS. We're going to have a purchase tax. And I told him, I said, look, You know, you can come up with any scheme that you want to try to replace the IRS. But the IRS is going nowhere as long as the Fed Reserve remains with its charter operating inside this country. Over and out. Story, end of story. Because what they're doing with this is literally a tax on a foreign corporation's product, namely the Federal Reserve note. This is a tax, and it's a lienable tax. In other words, since 1933, try getting rid of the IRS without getting rid of the Federal Reserve. It ain't going to happen. 90% of our problems in this country right now will up and disappear like a cow fart in a good Texas wind. We get rid of the Fed, 90% of our problem is gone, and we've got a real crack at getting this country back. We'll take the break. Your phone calls, 800-313-9443. All under the heading of systemic risk. We're too big to fail. And guys, let's do a little recap here about how this thing came about. Old Henry Paulson, old Hanky Panky. He was there at Goldman Sachs. Tim Geithner was sitting in New York City at the New York City Fed Bank. And things started to go a little awry back in 2007. And go awry they did. You watched the Bear Stearns blow out. Right on the heels of that was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And, of course, then came Lehman Brothers. And then we really got into some stuff when AIG popped up. Now, AIG had like $85 billion out there on their CDOs. And a CDO, folks, they were selling insurance in case stuff kind of went belly up. Well, that caused a major problem. And then we had to move quickly going into the federal bailout, the TARP. That happened on September 18th of last year. Or, I'm sorry, 2 years ago. And, well, then we had to do capital injections. In the meantime, things started to fall apart a little bit, like Bank of England and Iceland. I remember that like it was yesterday, Bob. All of a sudden, there's an entire country that's bankrupt, much like we are here. But in this, it is the securities and mortgage fraud, these investment banks. They took off the controls at the, remember Alan Greenberg came out, remember his little spiel in front of the vaunted ones in Washington, D.C., saying that, hey, I used to be with the CFTC. You guys back in 99, under Billy Clinton, cooked up a little thing, and Paulson was right in the mix on this thing. Here's the guy that became our Treasury Secretary that was in on the fix to allow all these derivatives, $500 trillion worth of them, to go worldwide. This creature should be in jail. He should be locked up. But he's running around free. And what are they saying now,
John,
Bob? Yeah.
I don't think that people understand that in order to deal with these people, you have to understand that they are a criminal mind. And if you can't mentally track what they're doing, where they're going, you miss the whole thing.
Yeah.
A good example right now is the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Corporation. Some 80-something% of the shorts in silver are held by J.P. Morgan Chase and HSBC. That's concentration. That's against the rules. It's illegal. They continue to let it go on. And the gold market, the commercials, they are banks, the same banks and some others, who, in both cases, in silver and gold, are working for the United States government, and the CFTC is a government agency. So nothing is going to happen to stop the concentration and manipulation of gold and silver, because it's a group of criminals all working together, like Geithner and Paulson and Bernanke and Greenspan and Volcker and on and on and on. And what you said at the very end of the last segment was one of the truest things you've ever said, and that is, we get rid of the Federal Reserve, we get rid of the IRS, we get rid of the Fed, we get rid of the IRS, 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 we we get rid of the IRS, and we get our country back. And it's an enormous key. And this legislation goes through, and I think it will, we can start slamming these people. One of the things that people have to understand is no matter what it takes, you got to take these people down. No, whatever it takes, they do to us all the time by stealing from us. And of course, they hold the reins of power. They hold power in Congress because they pay them almost all of them off. And so we have to use some of the same tactics against them. And that's why I drill them all the time in my publication. And they can't defend themselves. And the reason that they can't is because what we say they're doing, they are doing. And they hide behind this mask